Alright, and once again back. Finished the book, took a little while, but yeah, just finished up this book right here. A History of Buddhist Thought, Continuities and Discontinuities by David J. Kalupahana. So I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's the book right here. Alright, continuing on with religion, but I decided to go into the philosophical side. You know, this does not go into holy places in the Buddhist religion. This does not go into ritual or nothing like that and stuff. It's pretty much just the philosophical foundation of Buddhism. Alright, so okay, let me make sure I do it right in there. Alright, basically, I've read this guy before, Kalupahana, and I read an earlier version of this book. He wrote a book like in the 1970s, and I got a hold of that, and it's way thinner than that. That book is about 250 pages, whereas the book I got, the first edition in the 70s, was about 110, maybe 115 pages, and this one, that was about 1976, this was about 1992. So yeah, he really expanded on what he did from the first edition. So that's almost like, what, about 16 years? So, and that was a good book to kind of get into the basic, it was like a good intro book. You know what I'm saying? When you don't know anything and stuff. And I read that a couple years ago. But then, you know, I was in the library and was going through the Buddhist books and stuff. And then I kept on finding his name. Then I found this and I was like, wait a minute. That's just like the other book. And I looked at it and read the intro and was like, oh, yep, it's an updated version. So I said, you know what? It's been a little while since I read the first book. Let me get the updated edition because it's way bigger, way thicker and stuff. You know, and I was able to find the exact same first edition in the same library, and I compared them and was like, oh, okay, cool. So, you know, a little bit further along and decided to get more in depth. Basically, it's split into two halves, okay? The first half is just basic, goes through the basic fundamentals of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist thought and stuff, you know, goes into metaphysics and ontology and da-da-da, you know what I'm saying, in a philosophical, not a religious tone. And then the second one, you know, as opposed to the first one, which was like basic information about philosophical, about the religion, it goes into like a philosophical history. Okay, so the first book, of course, expanded. First, it went into the context of when Buddhism arose in India. You know, and then it goes into certain things like, let me go to the stuff, you know. Oh yes, then it also had like a little short biography of Siddhartha Gautama, you know, because the Buddha is not his name, that was the title. Then it goes like into knowledge and understanding. So pretty much epistemology, how we know things, right? That pretty much was like, you know, insubstantiability. Basically, there is no substance, pretty much, you know. So basically, nothing really has any intrinsic value. So you question everything. Experience and theory, that's pretty much like the same thing, you know, since, you know, nothing has any intrinsic value, since everything is insubstantial. There's no substances because nothing, let me restate that. It's basically saying only things that have value are things that exist in a vacuum. Basically, they exist ex nihilo. Like there was nothing, and then all of a sudden, boom, something was there, right? But because of interdependent arising, basically everything is connected. Basically anything like, okay, me, I'm a human being, I existed because my parents exist, they socialized, got together, got married, started having kids, had me. So basically because of these connected, interdependent agents and causes, right, things don't have any value. So that's what it's pretty much talking about. Language and communication, human personality, problem of suffering, freedom, happiness, moral life, popular. Basically, all of this in the first part basically depends on interdependent rising. Basically, since nothing exists in a vacuum, its value is based on being connected to everything. Therefore, nothing is stable also. So everything is constantly in flux. So permanency, since nothing is permanent, everything is temporary, has no value. So all of you can't really trust anything. I can't trust this printer or this desk. Can't say it really has any value, because certain factors, came together to create them. It didn't just appear. Therefore, like language and communication, that's not valid. Human personality, same thing. Objects don't really have anything. And then also another thing, it talks about, when it goes into epistemology, it goes into the senses. You know what I'm saying? Since your senses are the same thing, the object is doesn't exist in ex nihilo, and then so you're let's simplify. Okay, the light waves that hit you have no value. The senses, the object, the eye, has no value because it's a construction of things. The sense is created when the light wave hits your eye. That stimula is not valid. The neurons, where it goes up into the brain, is not valid. And then the brain itself, is not valid. So nothing's really valid. So really, especially, and it goes again and again about the senses and perception. Since the object itself is, comes together because of different causes, it's not valid. And then all your senses, then your mind is not valid. So yeah, insubstantiality pretty much permeates, all of the existence. So nothing really has value. So I really kind of, I really realized as my comparing it to Hindu books I've read and studied, whether it's old school or Rig Veda or Vedanta, it's pretty much very much life negating, so it really doesn't give me value to life. So yeah, that's basically, just the basic Buddhism, interdependent arising. Basically everything is causal. So basically it has to exist in a vacuum. It has to have no cause, it can't have a whole bunch of mixed factors. If it does, it's invalid. All right. Oh, and then a lot of times, also, it doesn't really go into metaphysics and stuff, like why are we here and stuff like that. It doesn't go into God or anything like that. Buddhism doesn't even answer those questions, even though apparently there were some people in the Pali Canon who proved that they went to Siddhartha Gautama and asked him, and he just ignored them. So, okay, the second part, the first part was just called, early Buddhism. Then the second part was Continuities, Discontinuities, basically the subtitle. And basically that's when it goes into the history of the philosophy. The emergence of Buddhism, the next one, goes into basically it very much states how there was, after Siddhartha Gautama's death, even though there was a council right after, about a year after his death, and they got together and decided to form the Pali Canon. They got to orally memorize all of the teachings and stuff. It wouldn't be written down till about a couple hundred years later in the 1st century BCE, and not even in India, on the island of Sri Lanka. Basically, this book doesn't go into it as much, but basically we know that there was as many as 18 different schools / denominations. We don't know for sure how many that there were. All we know is that Theravada today is like the one that lasted. We know of a couple of them. Let me go to them a little bit. because I could think of some, but I don't really want to go. Basically, and it goes on to some. It names certain ones, but I don't want to get it wrong. We have some people, like one was the Pugala. Basically, these were people kind of fought against the whole thing, because like a lot of Buddhists say there is no self, right? Which goes back to independent arising, since you didn't exist in a vacuum. But Pugala says, hey, there is a self. So that kind of combated that. There's another group, right? He calls those the personalists. There's another group called the realists. Sorry, I can't really, because he uses his own terminology. He doesn't really give too much of their terminology. And stuff. Sorry, it's been a little while. Then he has the transcendentalists. Okay. Yeah. And he has a whole bunch of them, like the Mahasangikas. That's one of them that we know of. Schools, Sarvastivada. Okay. We also have the Vatu Yavada. Sorry, I can't really go too much into this because he doesn't. Instead of using their terminology for themselves, he creates his own terminology. Basically, there was a whole bunch of different denominations and schools in the early, right after the Buddha's death. You know, we know of 18 of them, and they did not agree. They were fighting. They were calling each other heretics and stuff like that. So pretty much just like any other religion, you know. But a lot of them didn't last. Only one that did last was Theravada. And as you can see, a lot of them went against what the Buddha said, like the Pugala, the personalists. You know what I'm saying? You know, Buddha was like, I mean, excuse me, sorry for saying for Buddha, but I'm just using interchangeable start to guide them. But, you know, early teachings say there's no self. Pugala says, yes, there is an individual, there is a self. You know, the realists, basically, they're the ones that says, kind of going against saying how, you know, nothing is the insubstantialist nature of Buddhism, but they're saying that, no, things are substantial. You know, just because things didn't exist in ex nihilo, didn't come with nothing, does not mean that they have no value. You know, and the transcendentalists, they pretty much, I don't know, it's kind of hard because they kind of like look what the word says, transcendentalists. They believe they were above everything and didn't really totally, they were kind of going back to the Hindus and stuff. So, yeah. The next chapter, let's moving along, Mogalaputatissa. So I'm just going to call him Mogi. Basically, this was like a guy who during Ashoka is the first guy who like conquered most of the Indian subcontinent, right? And he conquered it like about 200 years later, because the Buddha that existed and died in the 5th century BCE, the 400s. Ashoka existed and conquered India in the 3rd century, the 200s BCE, and he became a Buddhist. After he killed all these people, he became a Buddhist and repented. And he's known for the Ashoka pillars with the edicts, and basically he cited Buddhism. And one of the main people, he noticed that there was a lot of fighting and stuff, but he chose one person who was like the most revered, and at that time it was this dude named Mogalaputatissa, and he had this book, you know, the Katabatu. Alright, and he was the one that was he was like a fundamentalist, and he kind of like ignored all the rest of these other schools and was like, hey, you know, I'm going back to the text. This is what the Buddha said, and that's what we should follow. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, he didn't put down all the other, you know, denominations and stuff, you know. So, then there's the Abhidharma. Y'all probably know it as Abhidharma. Basically, as we all know, in the Pali Canon, there's the Vinaya, the rules for the monks and the nuns. Then there's, of course, the discourses, basically what the Buddha said. All right, and then the Abhidhamma. The Abhidhamma is basically people afterwards, and it's not a credit to anybody. They have no author. These are people who analyze, the Buddha's discourses, and basically came up with their own analysis, and that's what they talk about. There is no one kind of tone to the Abhidhamma. You know what I'm saying? They kind of go all over the place. Sometimes they contradict each other and stuff. I've read excerpts of the Pali Canon. I've read some of the poetry that's up in there. Like the Therigatha and Therigatha. Therigatha is the monks. Therigatha is the nuns. I don't think I've read the Vinaya, the monks and nuns codes of conduct. I do know there's like 200 for the monks and 228 for the nuns, but I never read the Abhidhamma, so gotta get to that. The next thing, then he goes into the different denominations that formed afterwards. That's where you get complicated. Okay, a lot of times we know here in the West, we know of Theravada, basically that goes back to one of the original schools that survived. Then we know Mahayana, which came out of Theravada. Okay, but then they eventually broke away, and basically the Mahayana schools are basically they're not based on the Pali Canon. They come up with their own books like hundreds and thousands of years later. Basically, every time Buddhism got to another country, they formed their own denomination based on that ethnic group, and then they would come up with their own holy books and stuff. So basically, it's just like Eastern Orthodox Christianity, where they did not go back to Constantinople and consider it holy. They had their own holiness and stuff, But of course, Eastern Orthodox, they kept the Bible. They didn't come up with their own holy books and stuff. So that's the exception. Like I said, Mahayana came out of that, and different stuff. Some of this stuff, I'm not gonna lie, is new. Like Mogula Puta Tisa with the Kata Batu, that's something totally new. In all the histories of Buddhism, I've never come across that guy. They never mention him. So this guy was really good, and telling me everything, because I did not know about him and stuff. Next we have, and he kind of goes with basically the books of certain denominations and stuff that were turning points, or philosophers that were turning points in Buddhist philosophy, and sometimes it is the philosopher in their book. Like the next one, he goes to this guy. I did not know this book. Let me kind of flip through it so I can recall. Right. So next up is Mahayana, and this book called Vajra Tridika Prajna Parita Sutra. So I never heard of this. Basically, it's Mahayana, and like I say, Mahayana, yeah, it varies. Like I say, it's like the Eastern Orthodox of Buddhism, and what they emphasize. Okay, so with early Buddhism, they talked about the Arhat, and the Arhat was a person who went for enlightenment, but they did it individually, right? And Mahayana, they emphasize the Bodhisattva. That's a person who holds off from enlightenment, and instead of, just going for their own enlightenment, they hold off enlightenment to help other people in the community to get to enlightenment. You know what I'm saying? And that's the big difference between like Theravada, early Buddhism, and Mahayana and stuff. And basically the Bodhisattva, the Vajra Tridika was like the first book that, brought up the Bodhisattva. And this was like a couple hundred years after. It doesn't really say when it was published. So I can't really go too much into that, because that's all it really does as far as the importance of Buddhism. Next we get up Nagarjuna. He's very known. He's like one of the main people for, Mahayana. He's the one, his thing, let me see, because it's a first, shoot, he came up with a book, sorry about this, I don't know Pali, Mulamadhayamakar, I don't know. There is something, his way, hold up, let me see. Sorry about that. Madhyamaka. That's his. That's not his denomination within Mahayana, but that's his philosophy. Basically, it's called the middle way, right? Which basically is just a throwback to the Buddha. The Buddha said the same thing, because he was against. Because at first he went the ascetic route where he didn't eat and he was skinny, straight skin and bones. That's what you see some statues of him with that. Then you had he noticed the hedonist life, which is what he was living early on, because his dad spoiled him and didn't let him see stuff. He decided for them two extremes, go through the middle way, and that's the best way to live life, and also in your religious search. And basically Nagarjuna just re-emphasizes that. So he's kind of a fundamentalist too, but he's in the Mahayana school. I do know he lived about 2nd century AD. Okay, so that's what he's known for. Moving right along. Another book I did not know. This book is very, very good, because most Buddhist histories or introduction to Buddhism does not go into detail about these turning point books or turning point philosophers and stuff. This book does. It gets down to the nitty gritty. This was the popular thought. This is what people practiced. Okay. Something called Siddharma Pundarika, or Discourse on the Lotus Dharma. Basically, okay, good, because this one basically is the Lotus Sutra. Okay. Yeah, once again, it's Mahayana. It's basically thought to have been to precede Nagarjuna, but it was finally collected into a prose. Yeah, the Lotus Sutra is kind of really all over the place. I've tried to read it sometimes. I really can't say too much about it. And here, all I can remember is it basically goes into a lot of metaphysics. But, Siddhartha Gautama, he didn't like to even talk about metaphysics. He didn't think that it was important, but the Lotus Sutra, it kind of fills in the blanks on metaphysics and stuff. Why does the world exist? Why do we have existence? Blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? And this is where the idea of shunyata, basically it's emptiness. Basically it's a reiteration of interdependent rising or dependent rising. Okay, basically if it does not exist in a vacuum, if it doesn't exist ex nihilo, it has no intrinsic value, because everything is connected, everything is brought together by a combination of causes and interactions, and nothing is permanent, everything is in flux. Basically that's shunyata. But basically he just went further. Whoever wrote the Lotus Sutra, whoever composed it, collected it, because that's what they believe that a lot of these things are, these books that I'm going into were actually collections and just edited together. They emphasized the interdependent rising, but they just reinterpreted it and went even further into it than the Buddha did. So that's the contribution of the Lotus Sutra. Yes, the Lankavatara Sutra, another thing. Now, the Lankavatara, the Lankavatara is one of the foundational books of Zen. Okay. But Zen is Japanese. It didn't really start out. It was actually Chan from China, northern China. That is where Bodhidharma went to when he started Zen, but it was actually called Chan. And basically it was started up in kind of north central China. And along with his teachings, one of the books that he left, that he said, hey, if you really want to know what I'm talking about and stuff, or want to go further in depth on what I'm teaching you all, here's this book, the Lankavatara. Basically, the Lankavatara is basically translates to Discourse on the Descent into Lanka, basically Sri Lanka. And basically, it's a book that sometime in the CE. So, but it really doesn't really get a credit to anyone. Basically, it's pretty much Siddhartha Gautama. Even though it's not in the Pali Canon, he went down to Sri Lanka, okay, met the king there, and they had a discourse, okay? And see, I've tried to read the Lankavatara, but it is just so hard. I just gave up after like about 60 pages because it was just too hard. Can't really say too much other than it was like a founding the Chan school, aka Zen. Zen pretty much, goes into just throwaway concepts, throwaway rational thinking. You know what I'm saying? You have to get basically rational thinking through concepts and rationality. That is what's holding you back from enlightenment. That's what Zen basically said. That's what Zen Chan. It continues on into Zen in Japan, and Sion in Korea, and Tien up in Vietnam. Basically, just throw all that away. Basically, you have to go to the irrational mind in order to get a breakthrough, to become enlightened. That's pretty much what I can say about the Lankavatara. You know what I'm saying? I think that's probably the reason why when I tried to read it and gave up, I couldn't understand it. Because basically, rationality does not work. Concepts don't work. Just throw away your whole way of thinking and don't use rationality at all. That's not gonna help you to enlightenment. Vasubandhu, yes, that's another person. He's also in the Mahayana. What is he? I'm sorry, I can't think of what his. Well, they have it here, but I'm looking for the interpretation. The Vijnaptimatra Tasidi. Basically, oh, here it is. Establishment of mere conception. Vasubandhu. He's basically. Hold up. Sorry, excuse me. I can't really say about Vasubandhu because he basically goes into the psychological things of Buddhism and stuff, so he's not talked about too much, and I can't really remember what it was here. So basically, I know he goes into all the psychic stuff. The next one, Dignaga. Dignaga, basically, he was a logician. Basically, logic. He was about, and of course, logic is about basically arguing, basically be competent in argument, to present your position. Here, he doesn't really talk about, arguing against like other religions and other faiths and denominations. He's just about basically having a clear understanding of the concepts of Buddhism. You know what I'm saying? He does go like epistemology. Yes, he does go into a little bit more refinement of of knowing stuff, of the perception of your eyes, ears, nose, and all the rest of that. He doesn't really. He just refines things. So, Buddhaghosa. Okay, Buddhaghosa, called the Harmonizer. Basically, he's the one. Let me go to his thing. Sorry, I don't have this written down. He had this. Visuddhimagga. Basically, or the path of purification. Basically, he's the one. All the people I just mentioned and all the texts I just mentioned. That's the reason why he's called the harmonizer, because basically he looked at all of this stuff, harmonized it, tried to find out what they had in common. Okay, what they had in common, presented as basically, hey, it's all the same thing. And basically legend goes that he went down to Sri Lanka, right? And I forgot, I think about the 6th century CE or something. And basically, he wanted access. He knew that they had the first writings of the Pali Canon. He wanted access to that. And since that time, they had been commentaries on it and blah, blah, blah. He wanted access to it. This is the only place in the world that had it at the time. So he went down there and he said to him, hey, I'm from the mainland. I'm a Buddhist. I want to look at, the original Pali Canon and the commentaries. I want to look at your archive, your library and stuff. And the people was like, well, who the hell are you? Do we even know that you're a real Buddhist? You might be a heretic and stuff. You might not even be a heretic. You can be a Hindu or something else. How do we know? Right? So to prove himself, he said, hey, let me tell you what I know. And basically, you got the Visuddhimagga, right? Where he basically took all the knowledge that he knew, right? And stuff, because there were some writings on the mainland and stuff. You know what I'm saying? But, yeah, he wanted authentic stuff. That's why he wanted to get to the library in Sri Lanka, because the Pali Canon, he knew that went all the way back. There was some Pali Canon, like I said, the Ashoka edicts and stuff. They were all over India and da-da-da. But he wanted that stuff, the first stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so he wrote the Visuddhimagga. And he wrote it, took him like a couple months. I think it was, in translation, it's about 350 pages. Handed to him, they said, oh, okay, you are a Buddhist. And then they let him in and stuff. So the Visuddhimagga was not him trying to, bring all the Buddhist denominations together. He was just trying to get access to the library of the first written down text of, of the Buddha, of Siddhartha Gautama and stuff. So, yeah, he's that guy who wants everyone to get along. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people have said that if you want like a shortcut and a clear cut written in layman's terms and something easy access to, read the Visuddhimagga by Buddhaghosa. Because like I said, all the rest of them, Lankavatara, the Lotus Sutra, Punda, what's the rest of this stuff? The Vajracchedika, the Mula Mahadamika by Nagarjuna, the Sadharma Pundarika, Vasubandhu stuff, Dignaga stuff, da-da-da. Those things are notoriously difficult to access. Okay? You have to be super educated to know, because they use a lot. They don't use straight language. I've tried to read some of this stuff. Like I said, I'll read the Tara Sutra. I actually got a book, interpreted Dignaga's Logic. Actually, also tried to read something for Nagarjuna. Actually got a hold of a book that, was the Ashoka's Edicts. I've actually had certain Pali Canon interpretations, and trust me, those things are really hard, and they really are, especially the Pali. Pali is very repetitive and stuff, and it shows that it was an oral document, because oral documents use cliche words, cliche phrases to repeat, and then words that differentiate in the phrase. That's where you'll get the real meat of it, so it's kind of really hard to read because it's really repetitive, because it was oral, and that's the way they memorize things and stuff, and all the other stuff. Like I said, they use all these, it's no straight language. They use all of this symbolism that if you are not indoctrinated, if you don't really have a PhD in this, you're not going to know what the hell happens. That's what happened to me with a lot of these stuff. I tried to read, I got interpretation. This supposed to be the best interpretation. And I read it, didn't understand what the hell they're saying, gave up. But Visuddhimagga, haven't read it, but I've skimmed through it, and it does seem to be a little bit more digestible. Not totally, but yeah. So yeah, I guess Buddha goes to harmonizer. He made it easier. Then they go to the Tantras, right? Now Tantra, that's really big. That's basically Tibetan Buddhism and other Mongolian and stuff. Basically, pretty much the Tantras. You have Hindu Tantras and Buddhist Tantras. Basically, both of them were reviving the ritual practices of early Hinduism. Like sacrificing. A lot of people, when they think of Tantra, they think of the sexual rituals. But those actually were like done very infrequently and stuff, and they weren't the most important thing. And a lot of times they actually didn't have sex. It would be like softcore porn. They went through the motions and stuff, but actually didn't do it. Or they would have like a statue of people doing it and stuff. But that was just one of the rituals, and it was not holy. They also had the fire sacrifice, where they would light the fire and stuff and try to keep it, and then they would throw something on the fire. Sometimes they would sacrifice an animal by slitting his throat and let the blood drip on the thing. They would have chants. There's a lot of chants in Tantra. A lot of chants in Tantra. There's what they call it, the paritas. The paritas. Those are basically just chants that you do at religious festivals. And then they have chants when you're not at the communal thing, because a lot of people in early Hinduism and current Hinduism, they have altars at their homes. So then there was chants you do at home and stuff, and then there was chants when you do this or that, and you say it in your mind. They had things where they would burn incense and blah blah blah. So all these early ritualistic customs that they did in early Hinduism that had died by the time, I believe, Tantra came about in about the 6th century. That's when it started. The 6th and kind of 6th to 8th century. Tantra is also called Vajrayana. Okay, Vajrayana means lightning bolt. I'll get to that later. So basically, it was just a revival of Hindu rituals. And Hinduism revived it within Hinduism. But then the Buddhists that were there at the time, they took it from these revivalist Hinduists and applied it to Buddhism, right? And of course that was in India, but then they took it up to Tibet, and then it went further into partially into Northwest China, then up into Mongolia and stuff. But y'all know that's Tibetan Buddhism, so that's what. Yeah, but Tantra is considered also, just like Zen is like a sub-denomination of Mahayana. Vajrayana is also considered another subset of Vajrayana, but then they just broke away. But that's how it really started and stuff. And then also basically the difference is like the lightning bolt, Vajrayana fast. Basically, the other denominations, Theravada, Mahayana, they believe that it took either lifetimes of reincarnation to reach enlightenment, just like Buddha did, or if you were lucky, it might happen at the end of your lifetime if you live long enough and stuff. But most of the time they said, hey, it took zillions of lifetimes, right? Tantra / Vajrayana basically said, hey, you can get enlightenment within your lifetime and not when you're old. You don't have to be a savant when you're like 6 years old and then when you're 80, No, you can come to it at 40 and then 10 years later you can get it by using these methods. Okay? And then they really, another thing that I noticed they talked about Tantra / Vajrayana, they expanded also with meditation and also yoga. They used a lot of yoga and meditation, and they went even further to it because, basically the earlier ways, they just really had, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting, they had samatha, which is to quiet the brain, and then I'm forgetting the other one. but it's called insight meditation here. So sorry, I can't remember the Indian word for it. But basically, that's when you examine your feelings and da 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 da. First, you got to clear your mind with samatha, quiet your mind, and then you have to investigate your feelings and stuff and explore yourself with insight, right? The Vajrayana, they said, no, you can basically, their most famous thing is basically visualizing gods, okay? Because it was to borrow from the Hindu gods, but then also when it got to Tibet, it kind of combined with Tibetan Bon. It's either Bon or Bon, right? And they use those gods to visualize, to do a visualization of a god while they're meditating, and it's supposed to help you reach enlightenment faster. All right. Another thing that Vajrayana / Tantra did is the fact that they had mandalas. Mandalas are those circle things and stuff that have a lot of decoration, but it's just expanding circles and stuff. These are basically supposed to represent the world and then also the realms of heaven and stuff, and that's supposed to help to give you visualization to help you while you meditate. Okay. Basically, it uses a lot of, once again, I have to use Eastern Orthodox example, because Eastern Orthodox, they use a lot of visuals to worship Christianity. Stuff on the cross, stuff on the windows. They would have these closets that would open up and would have like have a story with different panels of biblical stories. That's why, when you look at Eastern Orthodox churches on the outside and stuff, and then you look at what the priests wear, it's a lot of visual stuff. Those are things to help you visualize God. Well, same thing with Vajrayana / Tantra. These mandalas, this thinking of a god from Hinduism or Tibetan polytheistic religion, or Chinese folk religion, supposed to help you get enlightenment and stuff. It's kind of like when they say in the West, like, go to your spirit animal. Same thing. Instead of animal, it's a god, or the mandala, the representation of the world and stuff. And also, like I said, the paritas or the chants. You know what I'm saying? That's also by chanting. That's kind of like also, once again, with the Eastern Orthodox, where they have, the Jesus prayer, where you just keep on saying the Jesus prayer over and over and over again and stuff. Or they have apophthegms, where they say, apophthegms prayer is where you say what God is not. You don't say what God is, you say what God is not, right? In Eastern Orthodox, same thing here. You just keep on chanting. That's supposed to help you too. And you chant when you meditate, you chant when you do yoga, da da da. So it's very complicated stuff, rituals and stuff that you do, but these things are supposed to like build up this intensity, and that's where the thunderbolt comes in, because you basically build up this energy and this intensity, and then basically suddenly you just get enlightened. So so speed along enlightenment. So so I kind of went a whole long there. Then it goes back to chant or Zen. Basically, like I said before, that's pretty much just like, stop using your rational brain in order to figure things out, Then he kind of sums up, but then he goes back to the Lankavatara. And in the Lankavatara, the appendix, he has a history of the Lankavatara, which really helped me because I was really flummoxed when I first read the Lankavatara. And basically he goes into how the Lankavatara is kind of like a propagandist, work. Basically, let me see the discourse. He notices how the Lankavatara, hold up, sorry. The Lankavatara. Right. Basically, pretty much the Lankavatara is there. Basically, it was a fight between the Theravadas, who first came here, and the Mahayanas and stuff. Basically the fight between Mahayana means great vehicle, and then the Theravada was called the Hinayana, which is lesser vehicle or smaller vehicle, basically. And since they were fighting over who would get the king's, support, and the Mahayanas was really fighting. Theravada was older. Well, they needed something to prove their point, and basically his theory is the fact that when you look at the Lankavatara, because it does not reinforce the Theravada that was there, because the Pali Canon was written there on Sri Lanka first, that the guy who wrote the Lankavatara, that whoever wrote the Lankavatara, they give a name of someone who pushed it, but I'm sorry, but I can't remember, sorry. Basically, that you notice how, even though the Mahayana was making inroads at the time, when the guy who did the Lankavatara and stuff, and basically the Lankavatara was used to combat the Theravada that was already on the island, to switch it over to Mahayana and get the king's favor. So that's his theory, because when you look at it, you would assume that the Sri Lanka would be Theravada, but you go there now and most of the denominations are Mahayana. And basically he's saying that basically was the propaganda. The Lankavatara was used as propaganda to switch the island over from Theravada to Mahayana in order to win the king and stuff, And it happened. The king went Mahayana, and then basically the Theravada monasteries lost their funding, and some of them were chased off the island, and they had to retreat to India and stuff. So that really helped me understand that it was really more of a propagandist book. But yeah, that's kind of my long-winded summary of, the basic philosophy that was basically propounded, at the beginning of the founding of Buddhism. They go, like I say, he goes into what, the Buddha said according to the Pali Canon, and then he goes into the different denominations that were created in the wake of, Siddhartha Gautama's death, and how, as things spread to other countries and as time went on and India changed and stuff, how different denominations, according to the context that they were in, changed. So yeah, if you are really want to go deeper into, basically I suggest you find like a couple of Intro to Buddhism books, read those first, but then when you want to go deeper into Buddhism and get a real well-rounded where things and denominations, what they thought, where they started, what was the context of it, and what they actually believe and stuff, this is the book. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna lie. If you are just a regular person and stuff, you're not really into thinking about stuff, it's probably not the book for you. But if you're a person that thinks a little bit more than the average person, and stuff, and really want to go, really have a curiosity about Buddhism, or if you are a Buddhist and you want to, know why and go a little bit further into your practice, I suggest this right here. You know what I'm saying? If you can get his first book, that would be really great to start off with that, because this is really, really heavy. Because, I read a lot of philosophy and a lot of stuff on religion, because I'm just curious about those things, or intellectual movements and stuff. So, but even with this, I had to look up stuff, just not like the Pali terms, but just the philosophical terms and stuff, because he really, really goes deep into it. And I ain't gonna lie, I had to read a couple of chapters, and I was reading a lot of passages over again. You know what I'm saying? Because this is so much different, because, I grew up Christian, and, some of this stuff I was just like, ugh. But also at the same time, this, I have to say, really proved to me how, Buddhism and Hinduism is a self-negating religions or beliefs. It basically says that the flesh and the world is negative. You know what I'm saying? And if you're cool with that, I say go with Hinduism and Buddhism. Buddhism is just a variation on Hinduism. because a lot of terms they just reappropriate and use it another way, but it's kind of a variation. If you're not, it's probably, Hinduism, Buddhism is not for you because they are self-denying of the world. Basically, if you are cool with being a monk or a hermit or a minimalist and stuff, those Indian religions are probably for you. But if you're not, don't. And this really let me know a little bit further about, because I was practicing and stuff, going to Dharma circles and reading the text for a little while. This made me rethink, hey, do I really want to continue with this? Because, hey, self-negating. How you going to self-negate yourself? How am I going to self-negate my body, existence, the world? This is where we're living. You have to deal with it. So, so it made me really start to really reconsider. So I really, continue on with practicing Buddhism or even studying any Indian philosophies. I probably will just for fun. But this is something that goes deep, that even if you are practicing, you will reconsider, hey, should I keep on practicing that? But that's my little personal stuff. So thanks. Catch you later.